Hello and welcome everyone. In this chapter, we are going to discuss about the inter-VLAN routing. So this is very important concept when it comes to enabling the communications between two different VLANs. Okay. So take an example that where exactly the inter-VLAN routing is needed in which scenarios. Okay. So just to understand the same, see this. Say for example, we have a switch and switch is basically connected with, let's say, multiple PCs and multiple VLANs are also there. So I'll show you the scenario because that scenario is very important to understand. See, so yes, let's say this is my PCs. Okay, that's it. Say this. So PCs are connected like this. Okay. Say for example, this is my PC A, B, C, D, E, and F. So far, I will take one more important point here, as this is basically there in, let's say, in one VLAN. Consider this is in VLAN 10 and this is basically in VLAN 20, and the IP addresses of these PCs is basically from this range. Let's say here you have 192.168.1 dot, let's say, or I'll do one thing, 192.168.1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Similarly here 192.168, let's say 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 is the IP address that you have in this. And now the concern is that we want to have the communication from one VLANs to another VLAN PCs. Say for example, this is my source PCA wants to communicate with PC F, as this is my destination. Okay, so in this case the very simple things will be about the source will be like this, let's say 192.168.1.1, and the destination will be 192.168.2.3. This is basically the packet, you can say, you can consider as my data packet that you want to deliver. Since both are into the different network, 1.1 and 2.3, of course both are into different network. In this case, by default the communications won't be possible. Okay, so what exactly you need to do now? Of course, in this case you need to go ahead and make use of the routers, a layer 3 device. Make sure to have, very important, make sure if you have the requirement of inter VLAN routing, then the very first thing that you needed is the layer 3 device, and this layer 3 device can be a router or it can be a multi-layer switch, layer 3 switches, that is basically we considered as multi-layer switch. This is something we needed, and at least IP routing should be enabled. IP routing should be enabled, that you are using MLS or you are using router, this should be enabled, then only you will have the communications possible here. Okay, so we'll see that how exactly you can go ahead and perform, but as of now the points to remember, if you have the scenario where different VLANs and now you want the communications between this, you need to go ahead and make use of the inter VLAN routing concept. Okay, let's move ahead. So we'll get back to the same scenario one more time in this. So far, so inter VLAN routing is this, that what we have. Now say this, see the points, the very important points. Forwarding the traffic from one VLANs to another VLAN is known as routing, inter VLAN routing, correct? Now make sure to forward the traffic between the VLANs, you must be using the layer 3 device such as router or multi-layer switch. Read this. The port where layer 3 device is connected on the switch, that port should be configured as a trunk port to allow the multiple VLAN traffic. You know what? It is basically talking about wherever you connect the layer 3 device on your switch port, that port must be configured as a trunk so that it will carry the traffic of your VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 in this scenario. Okay, so it's like, say for example, let's say we have got a router here, and this is my router gets connected to the interface here. Okay, and consider this is basically your interface numbers, like interface 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, like this. So this port is basically, this port must be configured as the trunk, because normally this information from PCA has to go to this router will now go ahead and forward the traffic back, and the communications take place here. This is the normal process. So your port number 4 must be configured as a trunk link, then only it will be able to forward your traffic. So make sure that's very important points. Okay, so we'll see that how exactly you are going to enable the communications by using it. Okay, so this is very important points. Moving ahead, see this. When it comes to inter-VLAN routing, there are many methods you have. You have three different methods basically. You can do that by using the legacy inter-VLAN routing method, which is basically a traditional method generally not in used in the organizations. Next you have router on stick. Router on stick is one of the important points, because this is of course not widely used in the corporate, but so many questions will be there in the interview if you are going for. And it's very important to understand this router on stick in detail. Okay, so far we have multi-layer switch. By using the multi-layer switch also you can go ahead and perform the inter-VLAN routings. Okay, so we'll talk about the legacy inter-VLAN routing, and we'll discuss about the router on stick. Multi-layer switch is out of scope. Basically it is there on the next level on the CCNP. So we'll talk about these two in details. Okay, so let's get started with the very first legacy inter-VLAN routing method. So take an example to understand this legacy inter-VLAN routing. See, say for example, this is same. I'll design the same topology since it's important. This is my PCs where it is getting connected. And we have got a router here. Now see, port number 1 2 I'll say port number 1, port number 2, port number 3, port number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like this the port numbers are. And let's say this is basically the part of your VLAN, this is part of your VLANs. This is my VLAN 10, this is VLAN 20. IP address is about same thing, 192.168.1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Now see, generally I want the communication from this to this. This is my source and this is my destinations. So what happens here, the source will be as 192.168.1.1 and destination will be your 2.3, and this is your actual data packet. That's great. Now see what happens. Normally if you want to configure the inter-VLAN routing by using legacy method, you can take one of the port from here and connect this to this VLAN. Take another port and go ahead and simply connect with this port. So what happens in this case right now, this is basically, let's say, your fast Ethernet 0x0 and this is your fast Ethernet 0x1, and the router's interface getting connected with the same switch with the multiple link in different VLAN itself. And after that you need to configure the IP address into this. So let's say I am configuring from this range itself, I have configured one IP address here, and from this range I will configure one of the IP address here, 2 dot, let's say 100, and this IP address which you have configured here, this IP addresses will become the default gateway for PCs. Let's say 1.100, here default gateway 2.100, done. Now what happens here? Your router must be enabled with IP routing, just IP routing. Configure the IP addresses on this interface, and enable the IP routing. That's it. And connect the physical cable. After that, you just go ahead and do the ping from PC A to PC F. This packet is going to be successfully delivered. It will be successfully delivered, means you will be able to have the communication here. And this is basically considered as your traditional method, or you can consider as your legacy inter-VLAN routing. How come it is traditional? See, right now I am having just 2 VLANs, so I need the 2 separate cable which is connecting to respective of the VLANs here. What if I have the number of VLANs, let's say 10 or maybe 20? So you required that many ports into the router itself, and of course in the routers this many ports are not available. So it was there, legacy inter-VLAN routing was there, but now it is not there in the market, not there in the corporate. But yes, it was there, and this is what your traditional one. This is basically the scenario. So far, just to recap, how to configure this legacy inter-VLAN routing: take the router, connect the separate port and connect to VLAN 10, and connect separate cable to VLAN 20, and just configure the IP addresses from the respective of the network, and just enable the IP routing and configure the default gateway. And once it is configured, you are good to go ahead and have the communication from your source to destination. That's it. So multiple physical port is required, multiple physical cable is required if you have the multiple VLANs running in your environment. That's the major point. And of course, this is one of the drawback in the routers. You do not have the multiple ports. Even the routers are not good for your just LAN communications, correct? But make sure this is what your legacy inter-VLAN routing methods. Okay. So just have a look on the same one more time. I'll just go ahead with the slide deck now. Say this. So as I discussed, it is also called as the traditional inter-VLAN routing, and make sure it uses the router to perform the inter-VLAN routing. Each VLAN is connected to different physical interfaces of the routers, and large network with the large number of VLANs required the many routers interfaces, and which is not there, and that is what a challenge into your legacy one. So far this is the example of the same, where you can see this is my switch, and this PC is basically the part of your VLAN 10, this is the part of your VLAN 30, and it is connected to this. And now you have the separate cable, this is part of the VLAN 10 and this is part of your VLAN 30, and just enable the IP routing, another scenario, and your communications will take place from here to here via routers. So that's it for this particular lecture. This is what we have discussed about the legacy inter-VLAN routing. In next chapter we are going to discuss about the router on a stick, the second method of your inter-VLAN routing. Thank you. See you in the next chapter.